in all that. Then God is jealous. God is a judge. God is a judge. Look at this warning in Exodus 20 and verse 5. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Now, the third and fourth generation. So many times that verse has been misunderstood, sometimes even misconstrued, probably to some degree. The basic idea is this. It was very possible. It's even possible nowadays in some cases, because people are having children at young ages now. And so they're having grandchildren at young ages. But it's certainly in this day, when they lived along this time, it was very, very possible for 4 generations at least to be living around the aged head of the family. And because of the close ties of especially the patriarchal family, the influence of the patriarch, whether it was good or evil, whichever one, his influence affected all generations that were under his control. Because they were, in that day, the patriarch was in control. I mean, he was boss. That wouldn't be too bad nowadays to some degree, but I tell people, I say, at my house, I'm boss. B-O-S-S, boss. Bonnie can verify this. I'm boss. I went to town one day, and I said, honey, when I come back from town, I want hot water. I don't mean Sister lukewarm. I want it H-O-T, hot. I never did like wash dishes in cold water. No, that didn't happen. I made that up. But in that day, the patriarch ruled. You heard of ruling the roost? He ruled the roost. He ruled the rod of iron. His word was law to that family. And so he could influence them in a positive way, in a good way, or he could influence them in a very negative and evil way. And that's the initial idea of that phrase, to the third and fourth generations. And this is a way of saying that God, in his holiness, gives people what they deserve for their iniquity. Now, I also understand that sin has carryover, even if the original generation has died out and the patriarch has died off. Some of those influences still carry over and sometimes forms vicious cycles. And the sad reality is this: our sin affects other people. Sin is not something that you keep and harbor to yourself and you say, well, I'm not doing anyone else any harm. No, sin affects others. Besides the one who's committing that sin, it affects others. It's foolishness for a husband or a wife, for instance, to commit adultery and think, well, as long as they don't know, it's not harming them. That's a lie from the pit of hell. It is harming them, whether they know it or not. It is causing great harm to them on a number of levels that I can't even begin to go into right now tonight. But in the generations, a cycle of sin can be put into motion. Just as parents, as their sinful examples and influences influence future generations to become disobedient God haters, just like their forefathers. Still in Deuteronomy 24:16, it makes it very clear that all people are accountable for their own actions. Now here's the balance. In Deuteronomy 24:16, the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Now I do understand and realize that in this verse, sin refers to crimes that are punishable by capital punishment, punishable by death. But the principle of the spiritual consequences of sin are the same. The principle is the same. You've heard the old saying, some people used to think it was in Scripture. It's not in Scripture, but the old saying, every tub sits on its own bottom, which means everyone's accountable for their own. So, sin and the consequences of sin can form vicious cycles from generation to generation. Alcoholism, drug addiction, pornography, all types of sin and vices can be set into motion. And but now listen, that doesn't excuse that individual. It can help us to understand sometimes why they may be like they are, and why they may be falling into that same cycle, that same trap, why it seems they're in a cycle they can't escape from. It helps us to understand sometimes how we can help them, possibly, but that does not excuse them. And that's where, in this day and age, that's where so many people get so confused, because they think if you don't condone someone's lifestyle, then you must hate them. You don't like them. That's not true. Just because you don't condone a certain lifestyle does not mean you hate those people or hate that person. The sin of being passed down from generation to generation begins to form an endless cycle, and then they reap the consequences of those sins. But I'm here to tell you there's good news, because that cycle can be broken. That generational curse can be broken. God has made provision. But